Hi, I'm Crystal Froese, and this is Closest to the People. This podcast is about people, the systems, and the decisions that shape our communities, often quietly, and often without us realizing just how much influence is at play. Today's episode is about one word: complacency. It's not loud, it's not always obvious, but its effects can be powerful. It seeps in slowly, like the ebb of a rising tide. And by the time you notice it, it can be a complete catastrophic flood. Like the story in the city of Dixon, Illinois, a community of about 15,000 people. There was a woman who had worked at City Hall for decades. Her name was Rita Crundwell. She was both comptroller and their treasurer, two roles that should never sit with one person. One manages the money and the other reports on it. But in Dixon, Rita did both. And over 22 years, she embezzled $53.7 million from this poor city of 15,000 people. And this didn't start as a disaster. It started with complacency, the quiet kind. The kind that says, well, she's always handled it. Well, she knows what she's doing. There must be a good reason for it. Not one event caused this. It was a slow drift, a slow ebb. It was trust without verification. And what complacency looks like in real life? Well, millions were being taken in Dixon. Well, she was depositing all of this money into her own account. There was pools being closed in the city. Equipment was failing. There was public works people driving around in trucks with holes in them. People were retiring but weren't being replaced. And even the police and the emergency services were being unfunded. And still, the explanation from her was accepted. She would say, we don't have the money. That's complacency. Leadership not asking the second question, not pushing past the first answer, not connecting what doesn't quite add up. And complacency in leadership, well, here's the harder part. Complacency doesn't just live in administration. It can live deep in leadership too. Because leadership comes with the pressure to show that your community is stable, to keep things moving, to avoid kind of disruption. And you really want, as a leader in your community, to be seen as successful. And sometimes that leads to focusing on what's just visible. Maybe just cutting the ribbons, announcing those projects, keeping things looking like they're working just fine. Instead of asking, do the numbers actually support this? Where are we on this project? What are we not seeing? What doesn't add up? Who else should we be speaking to? Complacency and influence. Now let's connect this to something even more subtle. Influence. In small communities, influence is everywhere. Relationships, friendships, the history, support during elections. And when you combine influence with complacency, you get a system that stops questioning itself. And that can look like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's illegal, and it's not always intentional. Most often it's not. But it is worth paying attention to. Complacency combined with influence can look like staff regularly socializing one-on-one with elected officials, or conversations happening informally instead of through process, or counselors advocating behind the scenes instead of in the open, or business owners bidding on city work while sitting at the council table, or campaign supporters later appearing on contracts or approvals, or projects moving a little faster without even a real clear explanation. This is where complacency shows up. Because people are assuming, well, it's probably fine. Looks like they're doing it the right way. And no one is asking the next question. So back to Dixon. In the case of Rita Crundwell, complacency allowed one person to control the system. There was no separation, no friction, no real challenge. And not because the leadership didn't care, but because the system and the people within it became too comfortable. Comfortable with answers, comfortable with trust, comfortable with not digging deeper. And what breaks complacency is strong systems that don't rely on trust alone. They interrupt complacency. They separate those roles. They require transparency. They normalize those really difficult questions. And they create accountability that doesn't depend on people's personalities. And strong leaders, they don't just lead with good intent. They lead with clear, visible checks and balances. Because here's the reality. Complacency doesn't start with millions. It starts small. Small assumptions, small decisions, small moments where no one asks. Can you walk me through that one more time? That's the ebb of the tide. And if it's left unchecked, that's what becomes the flood. That's what becomes $53.7 million in Dixon. So here's the question I'll leave you with. In your community, it may never be 53 million, and I sure hope it's not. But what other smaller things? The blind trust, the quiet comfort, the decisions made without scrutiny that slowly erode confidence and transparency over time in your community. Are your systems built to withstand the influence and complacency? Or are they quietly shaped by them? Because the strongest communities aren't the ones built on trust alone. They're the ones that never let complacency take its place, and where community engagement keeps leaders accountable and systems strong. As a leader, I think about complacency a lot because it doesn't announce itself. It seeps in. So there are a few things I try to make sure that it doesn't take hold. I'll ask one more question, especially when the answer might sound easy or even if it makes people uncomfortable. I look for what doesn't quite add up, not just what's presented clearly. I separate my relationships from my decisions. And I welcome scrutiny and don't rely on one voice for critical information. I seek out all sides of the story. And I make sure that the public is part of the process, not just watching it. Because in the end, complacency doesn't start with millions, it starts with moments. And leadership is about what you do in those moments. I'm Crystal Froese, and this is Closest to the People. If this episode made you think, share it with someone who helps shape your community, because the strongest communities are the ones that never stop asking the right questions.